Professor Kelvran Thorik adjusted his 3 pairs of spectacles with a dramatic flourish, his elongated purple fingers clicking against the synthetic frames. The lecture hall at the Galactic Academic Institute buzzed with the usual pre-class chatter, a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic vibrations from his diverse student body. Today was going to be particularly entertaining. Settle down, Kelvran announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who had spent the last 2 centuries explaining why impossible things were, well, impossible. His 4 eyes scanned the amphitheater-style classroom, taking in the familiar faces of his advanced xenobiology students. In the front row sat Melix, a Zephyrian scholar whose gossamer wings occasionally fluttered when she got excited about particularly absurd theories. Her notebook was already open, stylus poised and ready. Behind her, Nexus Prime's crystalline form refracted the classroom's artificial sunlight into dancing rainbows across the walls. The crystalloid researcher took meticulous notes, each thought literally carved into his translucent body for later reference. Scattered throughout the remaining seats were the usual suspects: Gornik the mollusk, whose gelatinous form oozed comfortable confidence in his corner seat; Zara 9, the mechanical synthen whose optical sensors were already recording every word; and about 40 other students representing species from across the known galaxy. Kelvran's classroom was legendary throughout the Institute, not because he taught cutting-edge xenobiology, but because he specialized in the most ridiculous subject imaginable: mythological species. Creatures that couldn't possibly exist, beings that defied every known law of physics, biology, and common sense. Today, my dear students, Kelvran began, activating the holographic display with a theatrical wave of his hand, we examine perhaps the most preposterous, the most laughably impossible creature ever conceived by overactive imaginations across the galaxy. The hologram flickered to life, displaying a bipedal figure with pale skin, forward-facing eyes, and what appeared to be a complete lack of any useful evolutionary adaptations. Several students immediately burst into their species equivalent of laughter. Behold, Kelvran continued with mock seriousness, the so-called human. Mylix's wings fluttered so hard she nearly lifted off her seat. Professor, surely this is a joke. No species could be that ordinary. Ah, but wait, Kelvran grinned, revealing his row of perfectly aligned teeth. It gets much, much worse. According to the mythology, these creatures supposedly evolved on a death world called Earth, a planet so hostile that it actively tries to kill everything living on it. The hologram shifted, displaying various Earth environments: roaring oceans, scorching deserts, frozen tundras, and dense jungles teeming with predators. Note the complete lack of natural armor, venomous capabilities, or even basic camouflage, Kelvran pointed out, using a laser pointer to highlight the human figure's apparent vulnerabilities. No exoskeleton, no redundant organ systems, no ability to photosynthesize. They're basically walking meat sacks. Gornik's gelatinous form rippled with amusement. How do they defend themselves? Surely they must have some sort of natural weaponry. This is where the mythology becomes truly absurd, Kelvran replied, barely containing his glee. According to legend, they use tools, primitive implements made from materials they find lying around. And here's the best part. They supposedly became the dominant species on their planet, using nothing but their oversized brains and something called stubbornness. The classroom erupted in various forms of alien laughter. Zara 9's optical sensors actually malfunctioned from the sheer absurdity, flickering rapidly as her processors tried to compute the impossibility. But Professor Nexus Prime chimed in, his voice resonating like wind chimes. What about their supposed adaptability? I've read some of the folklore claims they can survive in any environment. Kelvran's expression turned even more theatrical. Oh, the adaptability claims are the crown jewel of human mythology. According to these tales, they somehow managed to survive ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and planetary climate shifts. Not through evolution, mind you, but through something called making stuff up as they go along. He manipulated the hologram to show various impossible scenarios: humans in spacesuits, humans underwater, humans in Arctic conditions, humans in deserts, The mythology claims they can live anywhere from frozen wastelands to boiling tropics, survive in the vacuum of space, and even travel between stars, all while maintaining the same basic body plan. That's scientifically impossible, Mylex protested, her wings now completely still with shock. No single species can adapt to such diverse environments without significant evolutionary changes. Exactly, Kelvran exclaimed, pointing at her triumphantly. Which is why humans are clearly mythological. The stories also claim they have this bizarre trait called creativity that allows them to solve problems no rational being would ever encounter in the first place. The professor pulled up another hologram showing supposed human achievements, crude space vessels, primitive computers, and what appeared to be weapons of mass destruction made from splitting atoms. The mythology suggests they went from living in caves to splitting the atom in mere thousands of years, Kelvran continued. Any species that developed that quickly would have destroyed itself long before achieving interstellar travel. It's basic evolutionary psychology. The students nodded in agreement, their various forms of expression showing they were thoroughly convinced of human impossibility. For your assignment, Kelvran concluded, I want each of you to pick one aspect of human mythology and explain why it violates known biological principles. We'll present them next week and have a good laugh about whoever originally came up with these ridiculous stories. As the students began packing their materials, chattering excitedly about the absurdity of human mythology, Kelvran felt particularly satisfied with today's lesson. After all, debunking impossible species was what he did best, and humans were the most impossible of all. Little did he know that his perfect, logical, completely rational world was about to be turned upside down in the most spectacularly impossible way imaginable. The heavy doors to Lecture Hall 7 burst open with a metallic clang that echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every optical sensor, compound eye, and sensory organ in the room swiveled toward the entrance. Sorry, we're late, called out a cheerful voice in perfect galactic standard. Traffic was absolutely murder getting through the asteroid belt. Kelvran's first pair of eyes blinked. Then his second pair. Then his third pair joined in, creating a cascade of confused blinking as his brain tried to process what he was seeing. 3 bipedal figures strode into the classroom with casual confidence, their movements fluid and purposeful. They were exactly the right height, exactly the right proportions, and bore an uncanny resemblance to the holographic projection that was still flickering behind Kelvran's frozen form. "Oh wow," said the first figure, a female with dark hair pulled back in what appeared to be a functional ponytail. She wore a blue uniform with various patches and insignia. "This is a much bigger class than I expected." "Hi everyone," she waved, actually waved, with her hand, like some sort of primitive greeting ritual. Mylex's wings began vibrating so rapidly they created a high-pitched whine. Her stylus dropped from nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor. "I'm Captain Elena Vasquez, by the way," the female continued, seemingly oblivious to the fact that half the class was hyperventilating and the other half was questioning their grip on reality. "This big guy here is our chief engineer, Marcus Webb." The second figure, a large male with calloused hands and what appeared to be permanently grease-stained fingernails, gave a casual salute. "Hey there. Nice place you got here. Very academic." "And this is our medical officer, Aria Stone," Elena continued, gesturing to the third human, a woman with sharp eyes and what looked like a portable medical kit strapped to her belt. Aria smiled warmly. "Pleasure to meet you all. I have to say, this is the most diverse classroom I've ever seen. The biodiversity here is absolutely fascinating." The silence that followed was so complete it was almost oppressive. Ornik's gelatinous form had gone completely rigid, which was previously thought to be biologically impossible for his species. Nexus Prime's crystalline structure was refracting light in chaotic patterns that suggested his thought processes had completely shut down. Zara 9's optical sensors were spinning in their housings like a broken compass, emitting a soft whirring sound that grew progressively more frantic. Kelvran opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound emerged. His four eyes were locked onto the three humans, and his brain was desperately trying to reconcile what he was seeing with everything he knew about biology, physics, and reality itself. Elena said, her cheerful demeanor faltering slightly as she noticed the room's complete paralysis. Did we interrupt something important? The folks at the front desk said this was the xenobiology department. Your Kelvran's voice came out as a strangled whisper. You're not real. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Well, that's a new one. Usually people complain about my personality, not my existence. Impossible. Mylex shrieked, her voice reaching frequencies that made several students cover their auditory organs. This is impossible. You can't be here. You don't exist. The three humans exchanged glances. Okay, Aria said slowly. This is definitely not the reaction we were expecting from the cultural exchange program. Cultural exchange what now? Kelvran managed to croak. Elena pulled out a data pad that looked suspiciously primitive compared to the advanced technology surrounding them. The Galactic Cultural Exchange Initiative? We're here to participate in academic discussions, share knowledge, maybe do some guest lectures. Your institute specifically requested representatives from Earth. Earth is mythological, screamed a student from the back row. Earth is what? Marcus looked genuinely confused. I mean, I know it's not much to look at from space, mostly blue and green with some brown bits, but mythological seems a bit harsh. That's when Kelvran fainted. His four eyes rolled back in perfect synchronization, and his elongated purple form toppled backward with a thud that shook the entire podium. His spectacles went flying in three different directions. The classroom erupted into complete chaos. Students began fleeing toward the exits, their various forms of locomotion creating a bizarre stampede of slithering, floating, skittering, and rolling. Mylex's wings carried her straight up toward the ceiling, where she clung to a light fixture, hyperventilating in short, sharp whistles. Gornick had somehow liquefied himself and was flowing under the door like an organic river of panic. Nexus Prime was making sounds like breaking glass as his crystalline form vibrated with what could only be described as an existential crisis. Should we help him? Aria asked, pointing at Kelvran's unconscious form. I think we broke their professor, Marcus observed with clinical detachment. Elena looked around at the chaos, the fleeing students, and the unconscious alien educator. You know what? This might explain why we got such a good deal on those travel tickets. 20 minutes later, Kelvran's eyes fluttered open to find Aria Stone hovering over him with what appeared to be a primitive diagnostic device. The chaos had settled somewhat, though half his students were still pressed against the far walls like they were witnessing a natural disaster. There we go, Aria said cheerfully, waving a small flashlight in front of his eyes. Pupils are reactive, no signs of concussion. You just had a good old-fashioned fainting spell. A flashlight, Kelvran whispered, staring at the device in horror. You're using a flashlight for medical diagnosis. Well, yeah, works great for checking pupil response. I've been using them for centuries. Aria clicked it off and tucked it back into her kit. Though I have to say, having four eyes makes the exam twice as interesting. Kelvran struggled to sit up, his academic mind desperately trying to reassert some semblance of logic. This is all some elaborate hoax. Holographic projections, maybe. Very sophisticated ones. Elena, who had been examining the classroom's layout with professional interest, turned back toward him. Holographic? That's actually pretty flattering. Most people just call us weird-looking. Prove it, Kelvran demanded, his voice cracking slightly. Prove you're real. Show me these mythological abilities. What abilities? Marcus asked, genuinely puzzled. We're just people. The adaptability. The impossible problem-solving. The legendary stubbornness. The three humans exchanged another one of those looks. Okay, Elena said slowly. I'm not sure what you mean by legendary, but if you want a demonstration, she looked around the classroom and spotted a tactical hologram that Kelvran used for advanced xenobiology scenarios. Mind if I borrow this? Before anyone could object, Elena had activated the display. A complex three-dimensional maze appeared, filled with hostile environmental factors, predatory creatures, and what appeared to be several impossible escape routes. "This is a level 9 survival scenario," Kelvran stammered. "My graduate students spend weeks analyzing it. The optimal solution requires at least 4 different species working in coordination because no single being could possibly." "Oh, I see the problem," Elena interrupted, her eyes scanning the hologram for exactly 12 seconds. "The thermal vents here create an updraft, so if you triggered a controlled collapse of this support structure, the debris would create a bridge while the air current carries you over the acid pool. Then you just need to time the predator's feeding cycle, use its own hunting pattern against it by creating a false scent trail here, and..." She manipulated the hologram controls with casual efficiency, showing a solution path that completely bypassed every supposedly insurmountable obstacle. "You're out in maybe 20 minutes. 30 if you stop for lunch." Mylix, still clinging to her light fixture, made a sound like a deflating balloon. "Impossible," Kelvran whispered. "That solution requires predicting 17 different variables and adapting to changing conditions in real time." "Well, yeah," Elena shrugged. "That's just basic tactical thinking. You assess, adapt, and move forward. Pretty standard stuff." "Standard?" Kelvran repeated faintly. That's when Marcus noticed the classroom's environmental control system was flickering. "Hey, looks like you've got a problem with your atmospheric processor," he said, walking over to examine a panel that was displaying error messages in several alien languages. "Don't touch that." Nexus Prime finally managed to speak, his crystalline form still vibrating with stress. "That's a Cortex-7 atmospheric regulation system. It requires specialized tools and certification to even approach." Marcus was already removing the access panel with what appeared to be a bent piece of metal from his pocket. "Nah, it's just a standard flow regulator issue. See, the problem is you've got a feedback loop in the pressure differential. Pretty common in closed systems." He reached into the impossibly complex alien machinery with his bare hands, manipulated something with his improvised tool, and gave one component a sharp tap with his knuckles. The error messages disappeared. The atmospheric readings stabilized. The entire system began humming with perfect efficiency. "There we go," Marcus said, wiping his hands on his uniform. "Should run better than new now. Your original installation had a design flaw that was causing micro-fluctuations. I added a dampening bypass. You modified a Cortex-7 system with a bent piece of metal and your knuckles." Nexus Prime's voice had risen to a pitch that was making the windows vibrate. "And basic mechanical principles," Marcus added helpfully. "Once you understand how pressure and flow work, most systems are pretty similar." That's when Aria accidentally sliced her finger on a sharp edge of her medical kit. She looked at the cut with mild annoyance, pulled out a small adhesive strip from her supplies, and wrapped it around the wound. "There," she said. "Good as new." The remaining students stared in complete silence. You're healing yourself," one of them finally whispered. "Without a regeneration pod, without molecular rebuilders, without any technology at all." Aria looked at her bandaged finger. "It's just a small cut. My body will heal it naturally in a few days. Basic biology." "Basic biology," Kelvran repeated, his voice hollow. "Your species practices self-repair without technological assistance." "Well, yeah, doesn't yours? We need advanced medical facilities for paper cuts." Mylix shrieked from the ceiling. Elena, Marcus, and Aria looked at each other with dawning understanding. "Oh," Elena said quietly, "I think we might have found the problem." The silence that followed was broken by Gornick, who had apparently reformed himself from his liquefied panic state and was now oozing slowly back into the classroom. Wait, he burbled, his gelatinous form quivering with barely contained hysteria. "Are you telling me that everything in the mythology files is true?" "What mythology files?" Marcus asked, looking genuinely confused. Kelvran weakly gestured toward his holographic display, which was still showing Elena's impossible solution to the level 9 scenario. The files that describe your species as capable of surviving anything, adapting to any situation, and solving problems through pure. Through pure what? Aria prompted. Stubbornness and making things up. Kelvran's voice cracked on the last word. Elena blinked. I mean, yeah, pretty much. Is that weird? Is that weird? Mylex shrieked from her ceiling perch. You just solved a problem that requires the combined intelligence of 4 different species. Look, it's not that complicated, Elena said patiently. You just have to think about it from different angles. What works, what doesn't, what can you change, what can you work around? Basic problem solving. Basic, Nexus Prime whispered, his crystalline form now flickering with what appeared to be the visual equivalent of a nervous breakdown. She calls it basic. Zara 9's optical sensors finally stopped spinning and focused on Marcus. Query, how did you repair technology you had never encountered before? Marcus scratched his head. I don't know, it's just machines are machines, you know. They all work on the same basic principles. Matter, energy, cause and effect. Once you understand how things work, you can usually figure out how to fix them. But you used primitive tools. Hey, sometimes the best tool is the simplest one. A good whack in the right place can fix more problems than all the fancy equipment in the galaxy. He used percussive maintenance, one student whispered to another, on a Cortex-7 system, and it worked. Gornik oozed closer, his form rippling with curiosity. The medical files say your species can survive injuries that would kill most of us. Is this accurate? Aria shrugged. We're pretty resilient, I guess. Broken bones heal, cuts close up, we can function with damaged organs. Our bodies are built to keep going even when things go wrong. Without technology? Well, technology helps, but yeah, our bodies do most of the work themselves. It's called an immune system and natural healing. Doesn't everyone have that? The collective sound of alien species realizing they were apparently made of tissue paper compared to humans was indescribable. Professor, a small voice called from the back of the room. It was Ticton, a fragile crystalline being who usually whispered everything. If humans are real, what about all the other species in the mythology files? Kelvran's face went through several color changes. His life's work, his reputation, his entire academic career was built on proving that certain species were impossible. If humans were real. Oh no, he breathed. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Elena looked concerned. Are you okay? You're turning kind of purple. Well, more purple. My career, Kelvran moaned. 23 years of teaching mythological species. I've written papers. I've given lectures. I've mocked the very idea of your existence in front of thousands of students. Hey, don't feel bad, Marcus said cheerfully. Lots of people think we're weird. You should see how the Arcturians react when we tell them we evolved from persistence hunters. Persistence hunters. Several students asked simultaneously. Yeah, we used to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Sometimes for days at a time. Just kept running until whatever we were hunting gave up and died. You hunted by being annoying? Mylex asked weakly. Pretty much. Fey. Kelvran buried his face in his hands. All 4 hands. I need to rewrite every textbook. Apologize to every colleague. Retract every paper. Or, Aria suggested brightly, you could just update your curriculum. I mean, we're here now. We could answer questions, share some stories, maybe do a few demonstrations. Guest lectures, Elena added. Could be fun. We've got plenty of stories about impossible things we've done. You want to guest lecture? Kelvran looked up, his expression somewhere between horror and fascination. In my mythological species class? Well, it sounds like it's not really mythological anymore, Marcus pointed out. Maybe call it species that seemed impossible until they showed up in your classroom. That's actually not a bad title, Kelvran admitted. The remaining students looked at each other, then at the humans, then at their professor, who was clearly having some sort of academic identity crisis. "So," Ticton whispered, "does this mean the final exam is cancelled?" "Class dismissed," Kelvran announced weakly, though he wasn't entirely sure if he was ending the session or ending his career. Possibly both. Einted. The students began filing out in a daze, their various forms of locomotion more subdued than usual. They moved like beings who had just discovered that everything they thought they knew about the universe was wrong, which, technically, they had. Mylix finally descended from the ceiling, her wings fluttering nervously. "Professor, when you rewrite the textbook, could you maybe mention that some of us had always suspected the human stories might be true?" "You absolutely did not," Nexus Prime chimed in, his crystalline form still flickering with residual shock. "You called them biological impossibilities with delusions of competence." "That was before I knew they were listening." Mylix protested. Gornick oozed past them, pausing to address the three humans. "I have 17 questions about your digestive processes and 43 about your mating rituals. And maybe save those for office hours," Elena suggested diplomatically. As the last of the students shuffled, rolled, and slithered out of the classroom, Aria clapped her hands together. "Well, that was fun. Hey, would you all like to grab some coffee? We brought some Earth blend in our ship." "Coffee?" Kelvran asked, still staring at his holographic display as if it might suddenly make sense again. "It's a caffeinated beverage," Marcus explained. "It helps with thinking. Also tastes good." "Well, we think it tastes good. Might be an acquired taste for other species." "A psychoactive stimulant," Zara 9 observed, her optical sensors finally functioning normally. "Fascinating. You regularly consume mind-altering substances for pleasure?" "In productivity," Elena added. "Lots of productivity." Kelvran looked around his classroom, at the holographic evidence that his life's work was fundamentally flawed, at the three impossible beings who were casually inviting him for coffee. "You know what? Yes, I think I need something psychoactive right about now." 30 minutes later, as they sat in the faculty lounge sipping coffee that was indeed an acquired taste, Kelvran found himself taking notes again. Not debunking notes. Not academic criticism notes. Actual, genuine, scientific observation notes. "So you're telling me," he said, stylus poised over his datapad, "that your species' primary survival strategy is essentially try things until something works?" "That's a bit simplified," Aria said, "but not entirely wrong. And when you encounter a problem you've never seen before, you just make up a solution?" "We call it innovation," Marcus said. "Or engineering. Or sometimes holding it together with tape and hope." Kelvran scribbled frantically. "And this works?" "We're here, aren't we?" Elena pointed out. As the three humans continued sharing stories about impossible human achievements, Kelvran felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of academic life, genuine surprise. For the first time in years, the universe was showing him something new. And it was absolutely terrifying. His textbook Mythological Species and Why They Can't Exist would need a complete rewrite. Actually, he'd probably need to start from scratch. Maybe call it Real Species and Why We Didn't See Them Coming. As he walked back to his office that evening, datapad full of notes about impossible beings who treated impossibility as a minor inconvenience, Kelvran couldn't help but smile. His career was in ruins, his reputation was shot, and everything he thought he knew about biology had been turned upside down. But for the first time in decades, he was genuinely excited about tomorrow's lecture. After all, if humans were real, what other mythological species might be out there, waiting to casually stroll into his classroom and prove him wrong? The universe had just become a much more interesting and significantly more dangerous place. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Kelvran suspected that the humans would consider that a good thing.